Hello there and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on the politics in Africa and Arabia. The Russian mercenary group Wagner has apparently suffered heavy losses in the fight for gold mines in the Central African Republic. The rebel leader Amadou Ali, whose group is said to have carried out the attack in the north of the country, speaks of 17 Wagner members killed and several captured trucks. Since 2018, around 1,000 Wagner mercenaries have been fighting for the government of the Central African Republic against various rebel groups in the resource-rich north of the country. Under Russian influence, the government in Bangui has just agreed with its northern neighbors Chad and Sudan to fight the rebels in the region together. This has increased tensions because the rebel groups now have to defend their sources of income against government troops and Wagner mercenaries. That was said by Enrica Pico of the International Crisis Group, and she told this the Bloomberg portal. According to rebel leader Ali, only Wagner mercenaries were involved in the recent fighting near the Sudanese border. It was a fight between us and the Russians, is what the head of the Patriotic Coalition for Change told The Guardian. They are just using the government troops as a cover. The Russians have already taken over the whole country. They guard the border and are everywhere there is anything valuable. They are stealing our resources, he said. The country with 5.5 million inhabitants is one of the poorest in the world. A civil war has been raging there since 2012. And the Wagner Group is apparently taking advantage of the situation. In June, the notorious volunteers are said to have carried out a veritable massacre among gold prospectors near the town of Amdaga on the Sudanese border. Eyewitnesses reported weeks of attacks on miners' camps, with mercenaries firing indiscriminately and destroying workers' equipment and housing. At least 20 people are said to have been killed. Other witnesses spoke of hundreds of dead and injured. That was what The Guardian reported at the time. In other African countries too, the Wagner Group has recently appeared more and more aggressively. In Mali, the mercenaries work closely with the ruling military junta. There too, it's about, among other things, the control of gold mines. The German Bundeswehr wants to end its deployment with currently 1,100 soldiers in the coming year. And now Putin mercenaries are also gaining influence in neighboring Burkina Faso. The government has asked France to withdraw its troops. They could be replaced by irregular Russian fighters. The Wagner troops have been involved in the civil war in Libya since 2018, where up to 1,200 paramilitaries are said to be fighting on the side of General Khalifa Haftar. Under pressure from Western sanctions following the Ukraine attack, the Kremlin desperately needs foreign exchange to stabilize the weak ruble and the Russian economy. The gold from the African mines obviously plays an important role. The United States government recently put the Wagner Group on the list of international criminal organizations, also because of the group's crimes in Mali, Sudan, and the Central African Republic. Israeli forces attacked targets in the Gaza Strip early Thursday morning. According to the Israeli military, the airstrikes were aimed at missile and weapon production sites of the radical Islamist group Hamas in response to a missile fired from the Gaza Strip on Wednesday. There were no immediate reports of dead or injured. A few hours later, Israel's military said it had intercepted a missile fired from the Gaza Strip. Alarm sirens were activated in the city of Sderot on the border with the Gaza Strip. The armed group Lion's Den claimed responsibility for the attack. The group is primarily composed of young men from various armed factions in the city of Nablus and is mainly active in the West Bank. They were involved in confrontations with the Israeli army and attacks. After several arrests, things went quiet around them at the end of the year. It is reportedly the first time they had claimed responsibility for a missile attack. The missile was fired out of solidarity with the female prisoners, they said. Earlier, there were reports that Israel had tightened its crackdown on Palestinian prisoners. Accordingly, female prisoners are said to have been placed in solitary confinement after celebrating a terrorist attack. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken had previously visited the country last Monday and Tuesday. At the end of his visit, he called for moderation in view of the recent escalation of violence in the Middle East conflict. In Kenya, a labor court has rejected a request by Facebook parent company Meta to drop a lawsuit alleging exploitation and poor working conditions. Meta had asserted that two sued company subsidiaries were neither based in Kenya nor did they make sales there. The responsible judge, Jacob Gakari, rejected that. A so-called content moderator had sued an employee who monitors content or blocks or deletes prohibited content. He had complained that employees in Kenya were working under inhumane conditions because they were paid irregularly and were not allowed to organize in unions. The British law firm Foxglove, which represents the plaintiff, said it was very satisfied. It's true that the trial is taking place in Kenya, where the exploitation took place, as they said. And Facebook really is not such a great place. You all remember that my system was hacked. All the other social media were great in their support for regaining my access. The only thing Facebook did was deleting my account and telling me they are not even talking about it. So I left Facebook for good. It's dying anyway. In the breakaway region of Somaliland in the Horn of Africa, 3 provinces want to become part of Somalia again. The Clan Council of Elders in the provinces of Sool, Sanaag and Chain announced on Monday that Somaliland would withdraw its armed forces immediately. The provinces are claimed by both Somaliland and the neighboring semi-autonomous Somali region of Puntland. Violent clashes have repeatedly erupted there. Somaliland, a region in northern Somalia with a population of around 3.5 million, has been virtually independent for more than 3 decades. Under international law, however, Somaliland is only recognized by Taiwan. According to media reports, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has met in person for the first time with members of the Tigray People Liberation Front, or TPLF, to promote a peace agreement. The meeting was about the implementation of previous agreements between the sides and aspects that required more attention in the future, reported the state television broadcaster EBC on Friday, but no further details were given. The Ethiopian government and the TPLF signed a ceasefire in November after 2 years of war, and it was mediated by the African Union. Since then, peace negotiations have progressed slowly. First, the government and the TPLF had drawn up a treaty to disarm the northern Tigray region. According to the United Nations, several 100,000 people have died in the fighting since November 2020. The think tank International Crisis Group described the conflict in the populous country on the Horn of Africa with its 120 million inhabitants as one of the deadliest in the world. The host football associations of Australia and New Zealand are opposing Saudi Arabia's tourism board as a possible sponsor of the Women's World Cup this summer. According to a report by the Athletic portal, Visit Saudi will be a partner of the tournament from July 20th to August 20th in Australia and New Zealand. Martina Voss-Tecklenburg's German team, for example, I live in Germany, will play there in the preliminary round against Morocco, Colombia and South Korea. Saudi Arabia is generally criticized internationally for human rights violations. The kingdom wants to host the Men's World Cup in 2030 and is therefore pushing ahead with the sports policy efforts. If this report proves correct, then we will be shocked and disappointed to hear it, is what the New Zealand FA said in a statement. FIFA had not consulted on this, and according to the report, both associations have sent a letter of protest to FIFA, and the World Association was asked to comment. At least 5 Palestinians have been killed in a raid by the Israeli military in Jericho in the West Bank. Among them were 2 members of the militant Palestinian organization Hamas. That's what the Israeli security sources said on Monday. The 2 men fled to the city a week ago after an attempted attack on Israeli civilians. The Palestinian Ministry of Health confirmed the death toll. In addition, other people were injured. The operation took place in the Aqabat Jabre refugee camp near Jericho in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. The Palestinian Ministry of Health initially said that 3 people were injured, one of them seriously. There was no mention of dead people. The Israeli army said the soldiers were fired on during an operation in the Aqabat Jabre refugee camp in Jericho, and they returned fire and hit several attackers. During the attempted attack, 2 armed Hamas members are said to have come to the entrance of a restaurant in the Israeli settlement of Veret Jericho. Around 30 civilians were staying there. However, jamming prevented casualties, the military said. Hamas announced retaliation after the Jericho raid. If the enemy continues to kill in the West Bank, it will be a disaster for them. That was said by Hamas chief Ismail Haniyeh. The resistance would continue. Tensions between Israel and the Palestinians had recently increased again. That's why I have 2 reports in this video. A missile was fired from the Gaza Strip last week, as you heard earlier in the video, and Israel responded with that airstrike. Both the USA and international bodies such as the United Nations called on both sides to remain calm. And Israel has been governed by a right-wing government led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu since December. And his coalition includes religious fundamentalists and nationalists, among others. And so this really doesn't so much help to stay calm. But this concludes this week's video on Africa and Arabia. You'll see my next video tomorrow, of course. I'll be there. I'll be back.